The massive space station hung in the void like a crystal flower made of metal and light. Proxima Tertius was the neutral meeting place of the Galactic Council, where 12 different alien races came to decide the fate of entire worlds. Today they had gathered to judge humanity. Ambassador Hyun-soo walked through the long corridor toward the council chamber. His black diplomatic uniform was simple compared to the elaborate robes and biosuits of the alien delegates he passed. Some had multiple arms, others floated in hover spheres filled with strange gases. A few were so tall they had to duck through doorways built for giants. None of them looked at him with respect. To them, he was just another primitive from a backwater world. The council chamber was enormous. 12 curved seats rose in tiers around a central platform where Hyun-soo would have to stand alone. Each seat held a different kind of alien creature. The hegemony representatives looked like walking crystals that sparkled with inner light. The Thalaxians were covered in thick armor plating and had eyes like black stones. The nautiloids floated in tanks of blue liquid, their tentacles moving in patterns that meant nothing to human eyes. At the highest seat sat Vextar, the council leader. He was from the hegemony, and his crystal body glowed brighter when he was angry. Right now he was glowing very bright indeed. Human, Vextar's voice came through a translator device that made it sound cold and sharp. You stand accused of multiple crimes against the established order of this galaxy. Hyun-soo stepped onto the platform. He kept his face calm, but inside his heart was beating fast. He knew this day would come. Humanity had been preparing for it. I am here to listen to your charges, Hyun-soo said simply. A Thalaxian delegate stood up. These creatures were the miners and builders of the galaxy, and they were very angry about what had happened in Earth's solar system. 3 months ago, a human fleet destroyed our mining operation in your asteroid belt. 47 ships were lost. 2,000 Thalaxian workers died. Your workers were warned, Hyun-soo replied. They were told to leave our territory. They chose to ignore the warnings. The Thalaxians' armor plates rattled with rage. Territory? You have been spacefaring for less than 100 years. We have been mining asteroids for 10,000 years. But you are mining our asteroids, Hyun-soo said quietly. In our solar system. Without our permission. Vextar's glow increased. Permission? From children who barely understand faster than light travel? Your species discovered fire yesterday by galactic standards. You do not give permission to your betters. Another delegate spoke up. This one was from the Klaxon Collective, an insect-like race that thought with a shared mind. When one spoke, they all spoke together. The human expansion into protected sectors continues. They build colonies where they should not. They take resources that belong to others. What sectors? Hyun-soo asked. What resources? We have only taken what was not claimed, in systems with no intelligent life. All sectors are protected by council law, Vextar declared. All resources belong to the council until we decide otherwise. This is how it has always been. Hyun-soo looked around the chamber. Every alien face showed the same thing, complete certainty that they were right and humans were wrong. They had ruled the galaxy for so long that they could not imagine anyone challenging them. What do you want from us? Hyun-soo asked. Vextar stood up. His crystal body was now so bright it hurt to look at directly. Complete submission to council authority. All human military ships will be turned over to us. All human colonies outside your home system will be abandoned. You will pay reparations for the destruction of Thalaxian property, 50 million standard credits, and you will accept council oversight of all human activities. The chamber fell silent. Every alien delegate was watching Hyun-soo, waiting for him to beg or plead or show fear. Instead, Hyun-soo smiled. And if we refuse? He asked. Vextar's glow pulsed with satisfaction. Then we will demonstrate why 10,000 years of galactic dominance cannot be challenged by children playing with stolen technology. The full might of the Galactic Council will be brought to bear against your primitive worlds. War, then, Hyun-soo said calmly. War, Vextar agreed, though it will be over quickly. Your species has perhaps a dozen proper warships. We have thousands. Your technology is crude copies of ours. Your people know nothing of real combat. A nautiloid delegate spoke from its tank, its voice bubbling through the water. We have observed your military exercises. Very impressive for primitives, but you fight only against each other. You have never faced a real galactic power. You are correct, Hyun-soo said. We have never fought a war like this before. The aliens took this as a sign of weakness. Several of them made sounds that might have been laughter in their languages. "You have 72 standard hours to reconsider," Vextar announced. "Contact your leaders. Make them understand what they face. Perhaps they are wiser than their ambassador." Yunsu picked up his briefcase and prepared to leave, but he stopped at the edge of the platform and turned back to face the council. "I have a message from my leaders," he said. His voice was still calm, but there was something different about it now. Something that made a few of the aliens lean forward in their seats. "For 50 years since we first met you, we have tried diplomacy. We offered friendship, trade, cooperation. We asked only to be left alone to develop in peace. But you saw us as servants to be commanded or obstacles to be removed." Hyunsu's eyes moved from one alien delegate to another. "We tried diplomacy," he repeated. "You chose extinction." The chamber erupted. Aliens were making angry noises in a dozen different languages. Some stood up, others activated weapon systems on their chairs. Vextar's crystal body flared so bright it lit up the entire room. But Yunsu was already walking away. His footsteps echoed in the corridor as he headed back to his ship. Behind him, he could hear Vextar shouting something about arrogance and punishment. Yunsu activated his communication device as he walked. "This is Ambassador Hyunsu to all human vessels," he said quietly. "The diplomacy phase is over. Execute Protocol 7. Far away, in hidden bases throughout human space, people who had been waiting for this moment began to move. Ships that had been disguised as cargo haulers revealed their true weapons. Scientists who had spent decades working on secret projects smiled grimly as they activated their creations. The Galactic Council had ruled for 10,000 years. They had never lost a war, never faced a real challenge. To their power, they were about to learn that there was a first time for everything. Hyunsu reached his ship and looked back one last time at the glittering station, where the galaxy's rulers lived. Soon it would be nothing but space dust and bad memories. 72 hours, he said to himself. We won't need nearly that long. Admiral Ji-hoon stood in the command center of Terra Station, watching the holographic display that showed every human ship in the galaxy. To anyone else, it would look like humanity had maybe 50 warships scattered across a dozen star systems. The Galactic Council had counted them many times and decided humans were no threat at all. The Council was wrong about almost everything. Report, Ji-hoon said to the woman beside him. Captain So-young pulled up a new display. This one showed the real human fleet. Thousands of ships that had been hiding in dark space disguised as asteroids or simply invisible to alien sensors. All stealth fleets are in position, So-young said. The aliens still don't know we exist. Their sensors can't detect our dark matter cloaking systems. Ji-hoon nodded. The aliens had developed incredible technology over 10,000 years, but they had grown lazy. They assumed that if something was possible, they would have discovered it already. They never imagined that humans might take completely different approaches to the same problems. What about the Prometheus weapons? Ji-hoon asked. Dr. Minho stepped forward. He was a small, quiet man who had spent 20 years developing weapons that could kill entire star systems. Ready for deployment, he said simply. The quantum disruption torpedoes tested perfectly. They can collapse molecular bonds at the subatomic level. No known shield can stop them. The door opened and more people entered the command center. These were the real leaders of humanity's war effort. Not politicians or generals that the aliens had been watching, but scientists and engineers and spies who had been preparing for this day since first contact. Commander Daeun was in charge of the Deep Strike Forces. Her job was to hit the enemy's homeworld so hard and fast that they wouldn't have time to organize a defense. The relativistic kill vehicles are ready, she reported. Tungsten rods accelerated to 90% light speed. When they hit, there won't be enough left of the target to fill a coffee cup. Colonel Jae-min looked uncomfortable. He had spent 15 years living among the aliens, studying their cultures, learning their weaknesses. What he had discovered would make the coming war much more terrible than just shooting at each other with big guns. The neural pathway viruses are in place, he said quietly. I've been seeding them into alien populations for years. They think they're routine medical updates. When activated, they'll make it impossible for the different council races to work together. They won't be able to trust each other or coordinate their thoughts. Ji-hoon looked at the faces around him. These people were about to commit genocide on a scale the galaxy had never seen. But the aliens had made their choice. They could have left humanity alone. Instead, they had demanded submission or death. "How long have we been preparing for this?" Ji-hoon asked. "Since the first contact," So-young answered. "Every diplomatic mission was also a scouting mission. Every trade agreement let us plant listening devices. Every cultural exchange gave us access to their computer networks." She activated another display. This one showed detailed maps of every major alien world, every military base, every important facility. Humans knew where the aliens kept their food supplies, their breeding centers, their government buildings. They knew which species were allies and which were rivals. They knew every weakness in alien technology and society. "The Council thinks they know us," Diane said. "They've watched our ships, studied our weapons, calculated our industrial capacity, but they only saw what we wanted them to see." That was the truth. For 50 years, humanity had been playing a careful game. They showed the aliens obsolete technology and let them think humans were still using chemical rockets and primitive computers. Meanwhile, the real human civilization had developed things the aliens thought were impossible: dark matter manipulation, quantum tunneling weapons, self-replicating war machines that could hide in space for decades before activating. "They think we're children playing with stolen technology," Minho said with a bitter smile. They never wondered why children could reverse engineer their most advanced systems in just a few decades. The answer was simple, but terrible. Humans weren't just good at copying alien technology. They were better at understanding it than the aliens who had created it. Human scientists looked at alien tools and immediately saw ways to improve them, to make them smaller, faster, more deadly. "Sir," a communications officer called out, "we're getting reports from all sectors. The Council fleets are moving into attack positions around our colonies. They're not waiting the full 72 hours. Ji-hoon wasn't surprised. The aliens had always been arrogant, but they weren't stupid. They knew that waiting gave humanity time to prepare defenses. What they didn't know was that humanity's defenses were already in place. They had been in place for years. "Captain So-young," Ji-hoon said formally, "are your stealth fleets ready?" "Yes, sir. We have ships positioned in every Council home system. The aliens don't even know we're there." "Commander Da-un, are the strike teams prepared?" "Ready and waiting, sir. We can eliminate their leadership and command structures in the first hour of combat." "Dr. Minho, are the system killer weapons armed?" "Armed and targeted, sir. We can eliminate entire star systems if necessary." "Colonel Jamin, are the alien populations ready for neural disruption?" Jamin hesitated for just a moment. What he was about to unleash would destroy the minds of trillions of sentient beings. But then he thought about what the Council would do to humanity if they won this war. "Ready, sir," he said quietly. Ji-hoon looked at the display showing the countdown timer. 67 hours and 34 minutes until the Council's deadline. But humanity wasn't going to wait. "The Council has made their choice," Ji-hoon announced to the room. "They could have left us alone. They could have treated us as equals. Instead, they decided we should be slaves or corpses." He paused, thinking about all the human colonies that would be destroyed if the Council won, all the children who would never grow up, all the dreams and hopes and possibilities that would be erased from the universe. "They want to see what humans do when we're fighting for our survival," Ji-hoon said. "Let's show them." He opened a communication channel that reached every human military unit in the galaxy. "This is Admiral Ji-hoon to all human forces. The Galactic Council has declared war on humanity. They believe we are primitives who will beg for mercy when faced with their superior technology." Ji-hoon smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "They are about to learn that humans don't beg. We don't surrender. And we don't leave enemies alive to threaten us." Again, he activated the master control. That would begin humanity's first and last galactic war. "Execute Order Omega, show them what monsters they have awakened." Across the galaxy, human ships that had been hiding for decades suddenly revealed themselves. Weapons that the aliens thought were impossible began charging up. Computer viruses that had been sleeping in alien networks for years activated all at once. The Council had declared war expecting an easy victory over primitives. Instead, they had just signed their own death warrant. The Thalaxian homeworld of Kethmar had never been attacked in its 4,000-year history. The planet was protected by the largest defense fleet in the galaxy. Over 600 massive warships arranged in perfect defensive formations around their world. Admiral Korek stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the sensor displays with satisfaction. The human fleet approaching his world consisted of exactly one ship, a small cargo vessel that looked like it could barely carry supplies to a mining station. Pathetic, Korex muttered to his aide. Is this the best humanity can do? One tiny ship against the greatest fleet ever assembled? His aide checked the readings again. Sir, it appears to be a standard human cargo hauler. Mass of approximately 50,000 tons. No visible weapons. It's broadcasting a surrender signal. Tell it to prepare for boarding, Korex ordered. We'll take the crew prisoner and use them as examples for the rest of their primitive species. The human ship continued its slow approach toward the Thalaxian fleet. It looked harmless enough. Just a metal box with engines attached. The kind of simple design that primitive species used when they first started building spaceships. But as it got closer, something strange happened. The cargo ship stopped broadcasting its surrender signal. Instead, it began to unfold. What the Thalaxians had thought was a simple cargo container was actually an incredibly sophisticated weapons platform. Panels slid open to reveal launching tubes. The ship's hull reconfigured itself into a perfect firing position. Sir, the aide shouted. It's not a cargo ship. It's some kind of weapon. Korex was already giving orders to his fleet. But it was too late. The human ship, if it had ever really been a ship at all, fired a single projectile. The projectile was a tungsten rod about the size of a telephone pole, but it was moving at 90% the speed of light. When it hit the first Thalaxian battleship, the result was like a small star being born and dying in the same instant. The battleship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a mighty warship that had survived a dozen conflicts. The next moment there was only an expanding ball of plasma hot enough to melt planets. But the rod didn't stop. At relativistic speeds, it punched through ship after ship, each impact releasing enough energy to power a small city for a year. In less than 30 seconds, the entire Thalaxian defense fleet was gone. Admiral Korex had just enough time to realize what was happening before his own ship was hit. His last thought was that humans weren't primitive at all. They were something much worse. Meanwhile, in the hegemony home system, Commander Daun was leading her own attack. The crystal beings who ruled the Galactic Council lived in massive city ships that were works of art, as much as they were homes. Each one was a living crystal structure that had grown over thousands of years. The hegemony thought their ships were invulnerable. Their crystal hulls could absorb energy weapons, and their living structure could repair damage automatically. No weapon in the galaxy had ever been able to seriously harm a hegemony city ship. Dayun's squadron approached from dark space, invisible to every sensor the crystal beings possessed. Her ships were painted black and used technology that bent light around them. To alien eyes, they simply weren't there. Target the primary city ship, Dayun ordered. Quantum disruption torpedoes, full spread. The torpedoes looked like small silver arrows as they flew toward their target. But when they hit, they didn't explode like normal weapons. Instead, they did something much more terrible. They began to unravel the city ship at the molecular level. The living crystal structure that had grown for 3,000 years started to fall apart. Not from damage, but because the fundamental forces holding its atoms together were being disrupted. The beautiful spires and graceful curves that had taken centuries to grow simply stopped existing. The hegemony beings inside tried to evacuate, but there was nowhere to go. Their escape pods dissolved before they could launch. Their emergency systems failed as the quantum disruption spread through every system on the ship. In less than an hour, the greatest achievements of hegemony civilization were reduced to clouds of disconnected atoms drifting in space. But the most devastating attack was happening on worlds throughout Council space, and most of the aliens didn't even know it was an attack at all. Colonel Jamin sat in a quiet room on a human base, watching computer screens that showed the neural activity of billions of alien minds. For 15 years, he had lived among these beings, studying their psychology, learning how their brains worked. Now he was using that knowledge to destroy them. The nanomachines he had been planting in alien populations looked like routine medical updates. Every species in the galaxy used similar technology to fight diseases and repair genetic damage. The aliens had accepted Jamin's improvements to their medical systems without question. They didn't know that hidden in the healing, nanomachines were programs designed to rewrite alien neural pathways. Jamin activated the attack with a single key press. Across the galaxy, aliens suddenly found themselves unable to think clearly. Thalaxian commanders tried to coordinate their fleets but couldn't remember why they were fighting. Hegemony leaders attempted to make plans but lost track of their thoughts halfway through sentences. The different council species had always worked together despite their differences. Now those differences became insurmountable barriers. The insect-like klaxons couldn't communicate with the aquatic nautiloids. The energy beings called the vortex lost the ability to understand physical matter entirely. Worse, the nanomachines were designed specifically for each species. They didn't just disrupt alien thinking, they triggered the deepest fears and hatreds built into alien psychology. The nautiloids became terrified of drowning, even though they lived in water. The klaxons lost their hive-mind connection and experienced the horror of individual consciousness for the first time in their evolution. The proud hegemony found themselves unable to create or build anything, reduced to watching helplessly as their crystal cities crumbled. In military command centers throughout Council space, alien officers stared at their screens in confusion. They had been in the middle of coordinating an attack on human colonies, but now they couldn't remember why. Some couldn't even remember which species they were supposed to be fighting alongside. Communication networks failed, as different alien races found themselves unable to understand each other, even through translation systems. Ancient alliances fell apart as species that had been friends for millennia suddenly saw each other as threats. The carefully coordinated assault on humanity dissolved into chaos. Ships that were supposed to be attacking human worlds instead turned on each other, or simply drifted aimlessly in space as their crews struggled with minds that no longer worked properly. The Galactic Council, which had ruled for 10,000 years through cooperation and shared purpose, ceased to exist in a single day, not because their ships were destroyed or their leaders killed, but because they simply lost the ability to work together. Admiral Ji-hoon watched the reports coming in from across the galaxy. Every major alien military force was either destroyed or paralyzed. Ancient civilizations that had survived ice ages and stellar collisions were falling apart because they could no longer think clearly enough to function. "Sir," Captain So-young reported, "we're receiving surrender signals from 17 different species. They're begging for mercy." "Mercy," Ji-hoon repeated thoughtfully. "Did they offer us mercy when they demanded our submission?" "No, sir," So-young said quietly. "Then they'll get the same mercy they were planning to give us," Ji-hoon decided. "Continue the attack. No prisoners, no survivors." The first phase of humanity's war against the Galactic Council was over in less than 12 hours. It hadn't been a battle. It had been an extermination conducted with scientific precision. The aliens had expected primitive humans to fight with crude weapons and desperate tactics. Instead, they had encountered something far more terrifying. A species that had spent 50 years preparing for this exact moment. Humanity had tried diplomacy first. But when that failed, they showed the galaxy what they were truly capable of. The Council races were learning, in their final hours, that humans weren't just good at making friends. They were even better at making enemies disappear. General Wu Jin stood on the bridge of the assault ship Retribution, watching the planet below through the viewscreen. It was Nautiloid Prime, homeworld of the aquatic species that had helped form the Galactic Council 3,000 years ago. The planet was covered in vast blue oceans dotted with floating cities that gleamed like jewels under the alien sun. In 6 hours, those cities would be nothing but wreckage sinking into the deep. "General," Major Sung Min reported from his position at the tactical display, "all landing forces are ready. The Marines are equipped with the new powered armor and quantum blade weapons." Wu Jin nodded. The human Marines waiting in the launch bays were no longer the same species that had first ventured into space a century ago. Genetic modifications had made them stronger, faster, and more resilient. Their armor was powered by miniature fusion reactors and could survive in any environment. Their weapons could cut through any known material at the molecular level, but this wasn't going to be a normal military assault. Dr. Su Jin had spent years studying alien psychology, and her recommendations were being implemented across human space. The goal wasn't just to defeat the enemy, it was to break them completely. "What about the psychological warfare protocols?" Wu Jin asked. Dr. Su Jin looked up from her research station. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but the work she did would have horrified anyone who didn't understand the stakes of this war. "The aquatic trauma systems are ready," she said calmly. We've synthesized a compound that makes drowning impossible, but eternally terrifying. When introduced into their water supply, the nautiloids will experience continuous near-death sensations without ever actually dying. Wu Jin felt a brief moment of discomfort. What they were about to do went beyond simple warfare. It was torture on a planetary scale. But then he remembered what the Galactic Council had planned for humanity. Complete subjugation or extinction. Deploy the compound, he ordered. Begin the landings. The first wave of human marines hit the nautiloid cities like a hurricane of metal and death. Their powered armor let them move underwater as easily as on land, while their quantum weapons sliced through alien defenses like they were made of paper. But the real horror began when the chemical compound reached the nautiloid's water supply. Suddenly, beings who had lived their entire lives in water found themselves unable to breathe their natural element. They gasped and struggled, feeling like they were drowning, but the compound wouldn't let them die. They just kept drowning forever. The nautiloid military tried to organize a defense, but it's hard to fight when you're experiencing continuous suffocation. Their soldiers abandoned their weapons to claw at their gills, trying desperately to breathe water that their minds now perceived as deadly poison. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Dong Hyun was implementing an even more ambitious project. He commanded the Stellar Engineering Corps, and their mission was to move stars. The Klaxon homeworld orbited a red giant that had been stable for millions of years. The insect-like Klaxons had built their entire civilization around the predictable cycle of their sun. Their breeding seasons, their food production, even their religion was based on stellar cycles that had never changed. Dong Hyun's ship surrounded the Klaxon sun with gravitational manipulation devices that looked like small metal spheres. Each sphere was no bigger than a basketball, but together they could alter the gravitational field of an entire star system. Beginning stellar relocation, Dong Hyun announced to his crew, target coordinates are 3 light-years galactic north. The gravitational manipulators activated, and the Klaxon sun began to move. Not quickly. Stars are massive beyond imagination, and even human technology couldn't move them fast. But steadily, inevitably, their sun started drifting away from the Klaxon homeworld. On the planet below, billions of insect creatures looked up at their sky and watched their sun getting smaller. Day by day, their world grew colder and darker. Their crops failed. Their young stopped developing properly. Their ancient cycle of life simply broke. The Klaxon sent desperate messages to any human ship that would listen, begging for mercy, offering to surrender completely. But the human response was always the same: silence. Humanity had decided that the Galactic Council races didn't deserve mercy. They deserved extinction. While his colleagues destroyed alien worlds, Colonel Jae-min was completing the most subtle and terrible part of the human war plan. The neural pathway viruses he had planted years ago were still working, making it impossible for different alien species to cooperate. But now he activated the final phase. The viruses began rewriting alien memories. Thalaxian survivors found themselves forgetting their own history. They couldn't remember how to build their mining equipment or operate their ships. Hegemony crystal beings lost the ability to grow their living cities and watched their culture literally crumble around them. The few vortex energy beings who remained discovered that they could no longer maintain their coherent consciousness. They dissolved back into random electromagnetic patterns, losing millions of years of accumulated knowledge and experience. But the most devastating memory modification was saved for the Council leadership. The aliens who had declared war on humanity woke up each morning unable to remember why they had thought humans were primitive. They looked at the wreckage of their civilizations and couldn't understand how beings they had dismissed as children had destroyed them so completely. Ambassador Hyun-soo, now serving as humanity's coordinator for occupied territories, visited the ruins of Proxima Tertius, the great neutral station where the Galactic Council had met for thousands of years, was now a twisted wreck drifting in space. He walked through corridors that had once echoed with the voices of Galactic rulers making decisions that affected trillions of lives. Now the only sounds were his footsteps and the hiss of life support systems struggling to keep the damaged station habitable. In what had been the main council chamber, he found 3 surviving alien delegates. They sat in the ruins of their great seats, staring at nothing with eyes that no longer held any intelligence. The neural viruses had left them alive but had taken away everything that made them who they were. "Do you remember me?" Hyun-soo asked the crystal being that had once been Vextar. The former council leader looked up at him with confusion. When he spoke, his voice was like a child's, lost and frightened. "Are you here to help us?" Vextar asked. "Something terrible has happened, but we can't remember what. Our worlds are dying and we don't know why." Hyun-soo felt no pity. These beings had threatened to exterminate humanity. They had called humans primitive children who deserved only slavery or death. Now they were experiencing what they had planned to inflict on others. "I'm here to watch," Hyun-soo said simply, "to make sure you understand what you brought on yourselves." He activated a holographic display that showed the current state of former council space. 12 civilizations that had once ruled the galaxy were now extinct or dying. Their populations had been systematically destroyed not just by weapons, but by psychological warfare designed to break their minds and spirits. The Thalaxian mining fleets drifted empty in space, their crews dead from fear-induced heart failure. The nautiloid ocean cities had been turned into underwater graveyards where the dead floated among the living, who could no longer distinguish between air and water. The Klaxon homeworld was a frozen wasteland orbiting empty space where their sun used to be. "This is what happens when you threaten humanity," Hyun-soo explained to the broken council leaders. "We offered you friendship. You demanded our submission. We tried diplomacy. You chose war." He paused, looking at beings who had once commanded fleets that could crack planets. "Now you know why humans had never encountered another species capable of true interstellar warfare. It wasn't because such species didn't exist. It was because we had already eliminated them all." That wasn't entirely true. This was actually humanity's first galactic war, but the aliens didn't need to know that. Let them think that humans had been systematically exterminating potential threats for thousands of years. "Please," Vextar whispered. "We surrender. We'll do anything you want. Just make it stop." Hyun-soo shook his head. "You can't surrender a war that's already over. Your species declared that this was a conflict of extinction." We agreed. He left the 3 surviving council leaders sitting in their ruined chamber, too damaged mentally to even understand their own defeat. Outside, human ships were conducting final sweeps of former council space, eliminating the last pockets of alien resistance. Self-replicating hunter-killer drones were being launched toward other galaxies, programmed to track down any council species that might have fled. The systematic extermination was almost complete. Soon, humanity would be the only intelligent species in the galaxy. And that, Hyun-soo reflected as he returned to his ship, was exactly what they had planned from the beginning. Admiral Ji-hoo stood on the bridge of the Terran Dominance, humanity's newest and most powerful warship. The massive vessel was 3 kilometers long and carried enough firepower to destroy an entire star system. It was humanity's way of announcing to the galaxy that the age of alien rule was over. Through the view screen, he watched the final sweep of what had once been hegemony space. Where crystal cities had once floated like works of art among the stars, now there was only empty darkness punctuated by the occasional piece of debris. "Final casualty reports, sir," Captain Mi-young said as she approached with a data pad. Ji-hoo took the report and read it carefully. The numbers were almost impossible to comprehend. 12 entire civilizations had been eliminated in less than 6 months. Over 4 trillion sentient beings had died, the Thalaxians extinct, the nautiloids extinct, the hegemony extinct, the Klaxons extinct, 8 other species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. All gone. "Any survivors?" Ji-hoo asked. "Small populations on 3 worlds," Mi-young reported. "Approximately 50,000 individuals total. They're being held in containment facilities for study." Ji-hoo nodded. Those survivors existed only because Dr. Min-ho had requested living specimens for his research. They would spend the rest of their lives in human laboratories, helping scientists understand how to fight the next species that might threaten humanity. "What about the refugee fleets?" Ji-hoo asked. "Hunter-killer drones are tracking them to other galaxies," Mi-young said. "Estimated time to complete elimination, 40 to 60 years depending on how far they run." The hunter-killer drones were perhaps humanity's most terrifying creation. Self-replicating machines that could follow alien ships across intergalactic distances. They would pursue any surviving council species for as long as necessary. There would be no escape, no hiding, no hope of rebuilding their civilizations elsewhere. A communication alert chimed, and Jihu activated the ship's main display. President Hyejin appeared on screen, broadcasting from Earth. "Citizens of the Terran Federation," she began, her voice carried to human colonies throughout the galaxy. 6 months ago, the Galactic Council declared war on humanity. They demanded our submission or our extinction. The president paused, and Jihu could see the weight of what had happened in her eyes. Humanity had committed genocide on a scale that would have been unimaginable just a year ago. Today I can announce that the threat to humanity has been eliminated. The Galactic Council no longer exists. Their species no longer exist. Their threat to human freedom has been permanently removed. There was no celebration in her voice, no triumph. Just the quiet satisfaction of a job completed. "Some will ask whether we went too far," President Hyejin continued. "Whether we should have shown mercy to beings who begged for their lives at the end. But we must remember that they chose this path. They could have treated us as equals. They could have left us alone to develop in peace. Instead, they decided we should be slaves or corpses." Jihu thought about Ambassador Hyunsu's final report from the council meeting. The aliens had been so certain of their superiority, so convinced that humans were primitive children who would beg for mercy when faced with real power. They had learned too late that humans don't beg. Humans adapt, prepare, and strike back with overwhelming force. "The galaxy is quiet now," President Hyejin said. "For the first time in 10,000 years, there is no Galactic Council making decisions that affect the lives of billions. There are no alien empires demanding tribute or submission. There is only humanity, and the species we choose to protect." That was the next phase of human expansion. Ambassador Hyunsu, now serving as Galactic Coordinator, was already making contact with younger species that had been under Council rule. These beings, most of them still confined to single-star systems, would be given a choice: accept human protection and guidance, or face the same fate as the Council races. Most were choosing protection. Commander So Young entered the bridge carrying a report from the deep space exploration fleets. Humanity was pushing into previously unexplored sectors, looking for new civilizations that might pose future threats. "Ma'am," she said to Jihu, "the exploration fleets have made contact with 17 new species in the Outer Rim. All of them are pre-spaceflight civilizations." "Recommendations?" Jihu asked. "Standard integration protocols," So Young replied. "We make peaceful contact, offer them human technology and protection, and guide their development along approved lines. If they refuse or show signs of future aggression..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what happened to species that threatened humanity. Dr. Minho's research teams had established monitoring stations throughout human space, carefully studying alien psychology and technology. Any species that showed signs of developing weapons that could threaten human colonies would be quietly eliminated before they became a problem. Humanity had learned an important lesson from the Council War. It was much easier to deal with potential threats before they became actual. "Threats, sir?" the communications officer called out. "We're receiving a message from the Kepler colony. They've detected an unknown ship approaching their system." Jihu felt a familiar tension. Was this a survivor from the Council races? A refugee fleet that had somehow escaped the hunter-killer drones? Or something entirely new? "Put it on screen," he ordered. The image that appeared showed a sleek ship unlike anything in human or former Council databases. It was clearly built by an advanced civilization, but the design was completely unfamiliar. "They're broadcasting on standard diplomatic frequencies," the communications officer reported. "The message is interesting." "Play it," Jihu said. A voice filled the bridge, clearly artificial, probably a translation program of some kind. "Greetings to the human species. We are representatives of the Outer Rim Alliance. We have observed your recent conflict with the former Galactic Council. We wish to establish diplomatic relations and discuss terms of mutual non-aggression." Jihu smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. So there were other species out there, ones that had been hiding beyond Council space, watching and waiting to see what would happen. "Draft a response," he ordered. "Tell them we're always interested in peaceful relations with species that respect human sovereignty." He paused, thinking about the best way to phrase humanity's new position in galactic politics. "Also tell them that we hope they're wiser than the last group of aliens who tried to dictate terms to us." As the Terran dominance set course for the Kepler colony, Jihu thought about the future. Humanity now controlled the largest empire in galactic history. They had technology that could destroy stars and weapons that could rewrite the minds of entire species. But more importantly, they had established a simple principle that would govern all future contact with alien civilizations. Humanity would offer friendship to those who accepted it, and extinction to those who didn't. The Galactic Council had declared war on humanity, believing they were dealing with primitive children who would beg for mercy when faced with superior technology. They had discovered too late that humans were the galaxy's apex predators, not through natural evolution, but through deliberate choice and careful preparation. Now, as human ships spread throughout the galaxy carrying that same message to new civilizations, the universe was learning a fundamental truth. In the cosmic food chain, there could be only one species at the top, and humanity intended to stay there. The galaxy belonged to humans now. Not through conquest alone, but through the simple recognition that any species capable of threatening human existence had to be eliminated before they could act on that capability. It was a harsh law, but it was the only law that mattered in a universe where survival depended on being stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than anyone who might oppose you. The Galactic Council had learned that lesson too late to save themselves. Humanity would make sure no one else made the same mistake.